I'm Glenn. Welcome to my workshop. Today I'm going to show you two different ways to make an adapter to fit a standard cross refill pen cartridge into this vintage Hallmark wood pen. These pens were made by Hallmark in the 70s and 80s, and over time the cartridges, third parties who made cartridges, even Hallmark who made an adapter for it, have all gone out of production. And I've run across threads of people on Reddit and other social media who are lamenting the fact they can't get an adapter to make these nice pens workable again. I'm going to show you how to do that. For those of you that are familiar with the background of this pen, you might want to skip ahead to the point in the videos where I actually get to making the adapters. For everybody else, for whatever reason you're here, I'll give you a little background. Hallmark made in the 70s and 80s, they released these pen and pencil sets made with wood grained barrels. They made them in a variety of sets. You could buy just the pen, a pen with a roller ball, pen and pencil set, and over the course of the 70s and 80s, they apparently released multiple sets in 8 different woods. So a few weeks ago, my wife came home after having a regular lunch with her sister and my mother, who live about an hour away, and she came home with this box that was labeled Mom's pen from the 70s. And what I realized from that is when I saw it, I immediately recognized that I had a similar one. So I have a pen and pencil box where all of the pens and pencils and things that I use over the years reside. I recognized the fact that I had one of those pens in this spare pen and pencil box. I went digging for it, found it. It looks almost identical. And after doing a little bit of research, I discovered that, like I said, these were made during the 70s and 80s. There's quite a following of these pens on Reddit and Etsy, and you can find them on eBay. I had no idea that the pen that I've been carrying around for a while was now, anywhere from 40 to 50 years old. So looking into it a little bit, what I discovered is that there's some Reddit threads and other threads that are lamenting the fact that you can no longer get a replacement cartridge for these pens. These pens originally came outfitted with a gas pressurized cartridge. The patent on the cartridge relates to the Fisher Space Pen Company. So Hallmark offered that replacement refill for somewhere around 10, 15, 20 years after they discontinued the last of the wood pens in the 80s. And even after that, near as I can tell, in the early 2000s, they made a plastic adapter. Now, the pen cartridge is unusual because the pen screws in, the barrel screws in somewhere around the middle of the pen. Nobody else uses this cartridge, near as I can tell. So this was apparently custom made by the Fisher Space Pen Company for Hallmark for these pens. And when they were discontinued, there wasn't a second source. Now, apparently, during the life of the pen, some third-party companies also made cartridges that were non-pressurized, but they had the correct fitting on them so that you could put this cartridge into their pen. The pen my wife brought home from her mother had an original pressurized cartridge in it. The pen I had an aftermarket, what I believe is an aftermarket adapter style for this. Well, when Hallmark discontinued their pressurized cartridges, they apparently also then offered an adapter so that you could take a standard cross refill like this one, and put this adapter on. So basically, something like this, and turn the cross cartridge into something that would fit into the Hallmark pins. But as of about 2 years ago, these adapters were also not available. So I've run into a bunch of threads where people are trying to figure out where to get an adapter or how to make their Hallmark wood pins useful again. So the purpose of this video is I discovered 2 ways to do it. I'm going to show you how. One is to use one of the adapter cartridges. So if you have a pen that has an adapted a third-party cartridge that is part of your pen set for however reasons you got it, you can make an adapter out of this, and it's actually the easier of the 2 ways that I'm going to show. The second way is you can actually make a adapter out of a brass tube. I found an appropriately sized brass tube on Amazon, and I do have some machining capabilities, so I was able to cut a prototype from that, and I will show you today how I did that. So that's the intent of this video, and I hope that it brings you some useful information and you might learn something from it if it's of interest to you. This is the layout of the pens that I described. This is the pen that my wife came home with, given to her by her mother. This is a original pressurized pen refill cartridge for these pens, and there was an extra one that my mother-in-law had. This is the pen I had kicking around for I don't know how long. I don't even know where I got it, how I got it, where it came from, but I've had this forever. This is an aftermarket cartridge. There was a similar cartridge that came in my pen. I didn't have the gas pressurized cartridge after I looked this up. And then these are the 2 adapters. This is the prototype that I made from a cartridge similar to this, an aftermarket cartridge where I took the plastic off and then threaded it to hold the cross cartridge. This is the brass one. I'll show you how to make this one. Then I'll show you how to make this one from materials that are entirely available on Amazon, materials and tools. And this is a standard cross pen cartridge. Came in a set so that I can adapt this cartridge to this pen. And ultimately, just to show you for that, cross pen cartridge into the threaded adapter. Threaded adapter into the Hallmark pen. And now I have a fully functional pen again. The first adapter that I'm going to show you today is the simpler of the 2. It makes use of the fact that I have this expended third-party pen cartridge that is not a gas-powered pen. Apparently, there were at least a couple of companies that made replacement cartridges for the Hallmark pens. I don't know who they are. It doesn't appear that this type of non-gas pressurized cartridge was offered by Hallmark, but I've seen at least 2 pens with a different brand of this cartridge in it, or a different brand of this particular refill. This takes advantage of the fact that this plastic refill has got the correct threads that goes into the pen here. So the only thing we need to do for this, to make an adapter out of this expended refill, is to cut it to the right length and then tap the inside of this plastic to accept the cross pen cartridge. This is a big advantage because you don't have to cut threads at this end. Cutting threads on a plastic or brass material with a die tap is much more difficult than cutting internal threads that are up here. So this adapter requires the minimum amount of tools that you can probably, if you're a handy person and you have access, it would be best if you had access to a drill press. A small drill press would make this adapter very easy to make. You can do this with hand tools, and I'll show you a jig I made that makes all of this possible, but this is the one that we're going to get to first. Now, one of the things that I've done to make this job fairly easy to do is I took a scrap piece of wood that I had from other projects. I drilled a 1/8 inch hole here that this cartridge can fit into, because that way I can drive the pin refill out of this plastic. It's just press fit in, a very easy thing to do. And then the other thing is a hole here that this plastic will fit into like this. And the reason for doing that is that we're going to drill and tap this plastic piece, and a tap has a taper on it. What I'm worried about is if I don't provide protection for the plastic here, that when I drill, and especially when I start to tap into here, that the plastic will split. So I have a snug fitting hole here that will help us to be able to drill and tap this piece of plastic. Okay, so let's get to that point. That wood block that I pre-drilled, the 1/8 inch hole and then the hole for the barrel of this aftermarket adapter, is now in my vise. And what I'm going to do is just use a 1/8 inch pin punch to go ahead and knock out the original pin cartridge. There we go. Very easy thing to do. I have the cartridge and I have the plastic piece that I'm going to make the adapter from. The next thing I need to do is cut the adapter to length, and for this you can use a hobby knife, but I have this razor knife and little miter saw that's here, which does make the job a little bit easier to do. Entirely up to you if you have access to that kind of thing. I'm going to cut this a little bit long, and then after I finish the drilling and tapping, I'll file it down using a nail file or emery board to the right length for the pin. Okay. So there we go. Now we have the plastic tube that's cut a little bit long, which I'll use to make the adapter. The next step is going to be to drill and tap this to accept the cross pin cartridge, and then we'll check our fit. I'm ready to do the drilling. With doing a tap of a hole, you need to make sure that you cut a pilot hole that's the right size for the tap. The inside of this plastic cartridge is just a little bit, the inside of this plastic cartridge is just a little too small in order to be able to tap it correctly. So we'll drill a pilot hole with a tap drill. This is a number 20 drill bit. If you buy the 1036 tap drill from Amazon, I think it's around $8. It comes with the properly sized bit. So we'll just drill out the inside of the hole. I'm using that block of wood I cut as a guide. Again, this gives me support for the plastic without making it too difficult to cut through. So I can hang on to that from down here. Let's get my hole drilled out. I'm going to need around a 1/2 inch of depth or so. Okay. Okay. So now I've got the hole drilled, and the next thing to do is then to actually use the tap to cut this. I have my cut piece of plastic from the pen cartridge still in my wood block to provide some support for the threading. And then I'm putting it in some plastic soft jaws in my vise. That'll give me support for the walls when I start the cutting here, and then the vise holding the plastic in place. So let's just go ahead and start trying to cut these threads. I need to go in about a 1/4 inch past the taper, and maybe a little more, because I think I'm going to have to file down the end of this. Remember, I cut the plastic just a little bit long. Okay. I think that'll probably be enough. Clear the pieces. I'm just using the old cartridge to clear the plastic pieces after I've threaded it. Okay. Okay. That should be it. Now we'll have to check the fit, both. Well, I'm not too worried about this end because that was the factory threads on that third party, that aftermarket pen cartridge. But we need to make sure the cross threads fit in here, and then we have the right length. Here's our newly cut adapter, we hope, and factory pen. Now, taking a look here at how far the factory cartridge puts the pen tip out, I want to make sure that I emulate that with the new adapter. The new cut threads thread in perfectly. Okay. Fully extended, it falls a little short, about 1 millimeter short. So I need to, and I expected this to happen. I intentionally cut the piece of plastic a little bit long because I can always shorten it. It's plastic. I can use a simple emery board to get it to the right length. If I'd cut it too short, I would have just been out of luck. There would have been no way to lengthen it. So let's take this out, use an emery board on it, see if I can get the perfect length for it. This is plastic. For a lot of hobby work like this, I use these emery boards, the one that have a coarse on one side and fine on the other. You can get these at beauty shops or Walmart or any place that sells nail supplies. And I like the ones that have a coarse side and a fine side for something like this. They're inexpensive, readily available, and they work great. So let's do a little work on this. I didn't need much, maybe a 1/2 millimeter to 1 millimeter. Okay, let's try again. Okay, I think this time I've got it. You can see that the pin is projecting pretty much the same amount as a factory cartridge. Fully retracts, extend. So I think we have our first adapter. And there you have it, a cross refill adapter made from a discarded third-party Hallmark pen cartridge. In the last video, I showed you how to make an adapter from a third-party refill that were made for the Hallmark some number of years ago. Those aren't made anymore, so if you don't have a third-party cartridge that you can use this plastic piece to make this adapter, then there aren't a lot of good options for you. Hallmark used to make basically an adapter that looked like this that they would send you for free, but they ran out of those a couple of years ago and have told people they have no intention of making any more, that this pin's been out of production for around 40 years. They carried cartridges, refills for around 20 years after that, and then the adapters for another 10 or 15 years after that. And apparently there's just done. I found a suitable material to make a complete adapter from scratch out of brass. This brass tube is a thick-walled, I don't know if this will come through on the video, but it's a fairly thick-walled brass tube, 5.5 millimeter outside, 3.5 inside, which means it has a 1 millimeter wall, which means this brass tube is thick enough for us to be able to cut the threads we need on this end and to tap it for the threads we need for the cross cartridge on this end. So this end will cut the threads that will fit inside the Hallmark pen. They're a 1032 thread. It's a standard thread size. And for this end, again, it's the same tap that we needed for the cross cartridge that I made for the plastic adapter. It's that super fine thread 1036, but that tap and an appropriate size tap drill is available from Amazon for around $8. At this end, 1032 is a standard fine thread. If you don't have access to a tap and die set, you can also buy just the die to cut these 1032 threads from Amazon. I think it was $5 or $6 or something like that. So the tube, the die to cut the external threads, a tap drill, and a tap to cut the internal threads. All three of these are currently available on Amazon at fairly nominal costs. Now, the machining is a little daunting. You do have to cut down this tubing at this end. The diameter has to be reduced in order to be able to thread the die onto it. I have a benchtop lathe, but I'm not going to use that. I'm going to show you a poor man's way of reducing the diameter, especially on brass or a soft metal like this, to get a nice shoulder that we can do that cutting. Basically, what I'm going to do is cut this extra long, and then I'm going to put this into the drill press, and I'm going to use a file to reduce the end of this brass tubing. So with that said, let's get to trying to make a brass adapter. So I'm going to use my razor knife to cut this tube where I want it. That gets me my blank that will do the machining to. On the adapter, having a good defined shoulder where the threads go into the pen is important, because that defines the fit of the refill, the cross refill cartridge in the pen overall. So what I've done is I've put my brass blank is now inside my drill press, and I'm going to file this. I need to reduce this about a 0.5 millimeter in order to get the size that I need to tap the threads. But to create a tight shoulder, what I want to do, I'm going to use these files as this is spinning to cut this down. But in order to get a sharp thread, I need to keep the file up tight in here so that we get a well-defined shoulder on this piece of brass. And the way I do that without tearing up my drill press, I'm just going to use an ordinary flat washer. I'm going to put it in here, up here, so that when I start the drill press and I press my file against this, this protects my chuck from the file. And by keeping constant pressure up against this washer underneath it here, and the file against the brass tubing here, I should get a nice sharp shoulder that we need in order to define the adapter. You can see that I'm keeping the file up tight against the washer. And I'm watching to keep the side parallel. So what I have here is my 1032 die in a die handle. Now, just like taps, dies are tapered at one end, and then they're flush to the thread at the other end. So what I'll do with this is I will start with the tapered end to get the threads started here, but then after I cut the threads with the tapered end as far as I can, then I'll flip it over to try and cut the threads as close as possible into here. I'll probably still have to clean it up a little bit with a fine file in order to get a good fit in the pin barrel, but that should get us most of the way there. So unlike the plastic, which didn't need any kind of fluid, I need to go ahead and with metals, need a little lubricant if you're going to be doing tapping and dyeing on the metal itself. So a little oil there. Pressure to try and get this started straight. Okay, starting to cut some threads now. This die handle has a guide on it, so I can't really see how far down I'm going on that side. So I will flip the die over so the taper side is where I can see how close it's getting to the shoulder. Okay, the tapered side of the die has gone all the way down to the shoulder. I don't want to go past that because the cutting down of the brass tube here has made the brass pretty thin. And if I twist it too hard, it will just flat twist that off. So I've gone as far as I'm comfortable right now. We'll flip the die back over again so that we can get the straight threads cut all the way to the shoulder as close as possible. And then I'll still do a little trimming with a needle file just to make a nice defined shoulder there. And the last few threads just going nice and easy and gently so I don't snap it off. That looks about as close as I can get to the shoulder without putting too much tension on that joint. Now that I've cut the external threads and I cleaned up the shoulder in here a little bit. I've cut it to length and then I used the emery board to smooth everything off. So now it comes time for a test fit. You can see here we're still quite a bit long. So once I did that to make sure I had plenty of room for the threads, but I'm 3/16 too long on this end and I don't want to file that much down. So if the test fit works out okay, I'll probably trim this off to within 1/16 of an inch or 1 millimeter or so. Then tap the threads at this end and then file it to fit just like we did the plastic adapter. But the all-important test fit is the next step here. Can't hang on to that. It's a little short there. Yep. It's threading very smoothly down inside the pen. And it bottoms out, which is exactly what I needed to have happen. So we got a nicely defined shoulder. And the adapter threads in the way we expect it to. So the next thing is to trim the length a little bit, drill and tap this end, and we should have a nice brass adapter for this pen. Drilling this brass tube is a little trickier than the plastic adapter. With the plastic, the drill bit's going to follow that hole a little bit better. With the metal, I need to be really careful to get into the center, so I'm using a drill press vise as well as my drill press to make sure that everything stays square and that we get down into the tube about a ½ inch or so that I have room for the threads on the tap. And we'll use a little oil. That should be plenty of room for the threads and even the taper and a millimeter or so I'm probably going to have to file down at the end. Okay, let's tap it and see how we did. Whenever I'm drilling and tapping something like this where vertical alignment is critical, I'll go ahead and replace the tap drill bit, where I got the tap hole to diameter with the actual tap itself. Now I won't turn the drill press on, but I'll use the drill press to guide the tap into the hole that I want to do just to make sure everything stays perfectly straight. And after I get the thread started by hand, which I'm doing here, there's some little threads being cut here, so I know that it's bit in well. I'll just go ahead and release the drill press vise. Remove that. And remove the assembly from the drill press, put my tap handle on, and then we'll move to the vise to finish the threading. This way I make sure that I have everything straight and even going into that hole, because again, while there is some meat here on this brass, the drilling and tapping has made this pretty thin, so I want to make sure that everything's lined up accurately. Okay, I've moved my started brass tube tapping into the vise where I can do the hand tapping, finish with the hand tapping. Now I have to go a lot deeper than it would appear, because about the first 4 or 5 threads on a tap like this isn't a bottoming tap, it's a tapered tap. So the first 4 or 5 threads are tapered in order to guide into the hole, but those aren't full cut threads. So I have to go down at least 6 or 7 or 8 threads past the taper part, especially given the fact that I'm going to file off a millimeter or so to leave room for the cross threading. Now, this is going fairly well. It's nice and smooth. The cut is working well. Feels good. Okay, I've probably gone enough. Yep. There's at least 7 or 8 full threads. I'm using a small 1/8 inch round file here. Clean everything up. Now let's try the cartridge. Yep, beautiful. Fits in beautiful. Looks like I have a decent amount of threads here. So we'll just leave this set up here while I do a trial fit and see how much of this I need to file off, because this setup right here will be very convenient for me to file this down a bit. So as I'm expecting to. So we'll take this loose. Let's check the fit in the pin. Okay, let's see how we did. Threads in beautifully. All right. You can see here the tip, just as I suspected from leaving it long, probably just about, the adapter's about 1 millimeter too long. So we'll file that down and then try the fit again. Now, because filing would have put an edge on the inside, I'll just clean up the outermost threads by running the tap in a little bit again. Okay, so still plenty of threads for the adapter, for the cross to fit in okay. Let's see how the overall fit looks now. Looks great. Oh, tonight I went through the process of making 2 different adapters so that I could put this cross pin refill into this Hallmark wood pin. This is the original gas-filled cartridge. Can kind of see the projection from that. Then we made This adapter was made from an aftermarket third-party refill that had been used up, that I then cut and tapped to fit the cross cartridge into. Because these threads already fit the Hallmark pen, there was no other work that was necessary other than to cut and tap the unused end. And again, we get a nice adapter, good extension on the pin point here. And from that, and then not everybody's going to have access to a used third-party adapter. I made this brass adapter using materials available entirely off of Amazon that we now fit the cross refill into and into our Hallmark pen. Good tip extension. And we have a permanent solution. That brass adapter will never wear out. There's no chance of the threads ever cutting or anything else. These are my solutions to be able to fit a standard cross pen refill, which is available in different colors of ink, different point widths, whatever your preference is, to fit into the Hallmark pen where the original gas cartridge came out. So there's an adapter in plastic made from a third-party refill that had run out, and then a made from scratch adapter from brass, made entirely from materials and parts that you can buy on Amazon.